I mean, right now, the way we organize industries, we have predefined organizations. You either belong to them or you don't, and somebody sits at the top and they tell you what to do. And I just don't see anything remotely resembling that as the way of organizing production going forward. I just don't see it. I don't see how you could have an empowered population working in that kind of environment. So, I don't even know where to begin with enterprise, because nobody who studies business, to my perspective, or from what I can see, is even interested in the concept where the basic premises of business are undermined, where the basic premise of the purpose of an organization is to make money is overturned, where the precepts of growth and marketing are actually harmful to the enterprise. But I think all of that would be the case in a network model of an enterprise. So I haven't really had a whole lot of incentive to go into that field. I think that alternative enterprise will develop of its own accord, just like alternative learning will develop of its own accord, and outside the existing and the traditional system, and over time, over 100 years maybe, as a replacement to the existing system.
Okay. Just have a look around. There is something, because we had a very exciting discussion on Enterprise 2.0. There's something you would like to add, or? Well, people are very quiet at the moment.
Yeah, either I'm answering the questions very well or very poorly.
But in general, what's your relation to corporate learning? You just visited Brandon Hall.
I was just at Brandon Hall, and my relation to corporate learning is distant and cordial. I'm just kidding. I mean, from the perspective of corporate learning, I'm a bit of a gadfly and was introduced as such at Brandon Hall. I see a real contradiction in corporate learning that doesn't go away, and no matter how we approach it, it doesn't go away. And the contradiction is that while learning is intended for the benefit of the individual, corporate learning is intended for the benefit of the corporation, which is fine if those two things align, but increasingly they don't align, particularly when the corporation has no loyalty to the individual and therefore no intrinsic motivation to actually increase the skills or capacities of the individual, but simply to create behavioral competencies which increase its return on investment. There's a fundamental disconnect there. How the whole idea of learner-centered learning, or even learner-empowered or learner-controlled learning, is antithetical to the corporate structure, which suggests that it's the needs and the interests of the corporation that will determine what the learning is and how it will take place. There's been discussion by people like Jay Cross and others about informal learning, and a lot of what I say resonates with that discussion, because we talk about a lot of the technologies in common, a lot of the processes in common, and informal learning, even in a corporate domain, involves a lot of personal control and personal choice. But anything the corporation does with respect to informal learning also places an element of control on informal learning, and as soon as that element of control is placed on it, again, you're moving away from the needs or the interests of the individual. So my role in corporate learning is to tell corporations that really their best approach to learning is to allow learners to increase their own skills and capacities to the greatest extent possible in whatever direction those individuals should choose, and then to adjust the corporate mission and profile to match the skills of its newly empowered employees. But people don't seem to buy that.
Thank you very much. I still have 2 or 3 questions, so I'd like to move on. Will work and learning change when the digital natives arrive at the workplace?
Will work and learning change when digital natives arrive in the workplace? I would have to say it will. There are the standard sort of characterizations of the digital native, that they're more connected, that they're more independent, that they approach learning and software differently. And then there are the negative characterizations that they're not as smart, they don't read as well. All of these characterizations are, of course, overgeneralizations, but all of these characterizations, of course, contain an element of truth to them. I think that people who are entering the workplace will communicate in different ways, will more likely form networks outside the immediate corporation. The corporate wall is traditionally very large, and there isn't a lot of interaction between people who work in different companies traditionally. But as people enter corporations with 300 Facebook friends from wherever, they're not going to suddenly cut off these connections. That just doesn't seem plausible. So although their personal networks may shift over time to reflect the fact that they meet new people, have new interests, and are doing new things, nonetheless, many of the connections that they've established in previous lives or in previous employment will continue. So I think people will work in a much more densely connected network of interactions. And I think that will shape their communications, both inside the corporation and outside the corporation. It will limit the extent to which information can be managed with respect to these individuals, because now they have multiple sources of information and not simply their own employers or their own co-workers. And so consequently, it will be harder to create, if you will, and foster a particular or idiosyncratic corporate culture. So there will be less element of control. And that seems to be characteristic of what they're calling the millennial generation anyways. There's very much a hands-on element of this generation, very much a, I can decide how this works for myself elements. And I think we see that. That's not to say they're good at it. It's simply to say that that's how they do it. And they do it that way because that's how the tools that they use are constructed. And so they will probably take that with them as they enter the corporate world and the world of learning. More of a discovery, more of a hands-on, more of a don't show me the manual, just tell me how it works kind of attitude.
Okay. That sounds a little bit more optimistic than your statement on corporate learning for me. So there's still hope.
Yeah, well, I mean, when that generation collides with that tradition,
yeah,
there's going to be sparks, there's already sparks. So, yeah, I think it's optimistic. It's optimistic for the people who are working, who are coming into these environments. It's not optimistic for those who want these environments to stay the way they are now.